Hi, my name is Ramya, as Dr. Smith-Shank so nicely introduced. And my talk today will be just some explorations on art making as entanglement. So I'm going to just share my thoughts through stories and reflections. And it's kind of centered around this object. So if you'd like to come, it's a multimedia experience, a multisensory, if you will. So if you want to come experience what I'm going to talk about, feel free to do so afterwards. I'm just going to put this here for now. There's a needle, don't poke yourself. So I'm going to share my stories and reflections, and sort of carrying over Tim's theme of fear and mitigating fear through art making. And I'm not sure whether any of this is going anywhere, but it's my hope that there's something to these objects that I'm going to explore and the events and circumstances I describe. So here, I'm going to share one of my stories about growing up in America, but being an Indian person. I'm South Indian, and I started taking dance lessons when I was 5. And even though I lived in America, I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. I didn't want to learn ballet, jazz, tap, like the rest of my friends in elementary school. I wanted to learn this dance form, Bharatanatyam, which is a South Indian dance form. And my first experience of this dance form was from a wedding in India, and I just remember it being such a rich, multi-sensory experience, much like my talk today with the flowers. And I was just really drawn to this form, and I don't really know why. It could have been the sheer beauty of the performance. It could be the costume. It could be the flowers that the performers wear in their hair. The way they move their hands. And the one thing I do know is that practicing this dance form for 20 years has made its mark on the way I even comport myself, stand, and speak. You'll find if you talk to me in person, I'll often use my hands a lot to make gestures, and it's because of the learning of this dance. I can kind of go back to all of my hand gestures and kind of point them back to this moment in my life where I learned this dance. So its effects can still be seen today. So the performance has a lot of parts, and they coalesce to create an experience. So there's the music. It's a very mathematical, it's called Carnatic music, and it accompanies the performance. It has a very distinct beat. There's also the jewelry, there's the adornments, there's the makeup, and they all come together to create this performance. And it's kind of, it's not secondary, but it's definitely in service to the overall form. So the performer herself is in service to the form of the dance rather than being the sole attention of the dance. Everything is involved and everything is important in the dance form itself. What I didn't bargain for in the learning of Bharatanatyam is the kind of philosophical and bodily implications that I've experienced in the learning of the dance. Bharatanatyam requires you to be present in both mind and body, and these mind and body are both cultivated together in a way that shapes both entities, and they're not treated as different, which is in distinct kind of difference from Western ways of thinking about subject, object, and mind and body. So it's for me, sometimes I look at Western writings and I'm like, why is it like that? It just doesn't make sense because I've grown up in this kind of dual way of thinking, a little like Asavari was talking about her bilingual experience. It's a little like that for me because English is also my second language. So when you're a young dancer, just to explain my little GIF here, when you're a young dancer, you learn all the elements of the movements that you have to make, and then you get to put them all together, and you. This is kind of the first choreographed piece that you learn. It's called Pushpanjali, and it's basically invocation to, and an apology to the ground on which you're stamping, because it involves a lot of stamping, the dance form. And it's basically, you walk out onto the stage and you're holding some flowers, you put them on the ground, and you just say, I'm really sorry, I'm gonna be stepping on you ground, but it's required for the dance. So that kind of moment of recognition of the role of this kind of seemingly inert object of the ground really informs my current research. And I didn't think about it, obviously, when I was a kid learning this. I didn't think about, oh, that's interesting. But now I do. So here particularly, the repeated movement that I've kind of highlighted here is this woman first coming out onto the stage. She acknowledges up and she acknowledges down, puts the flowers on the ground, and then says, this is kind of the universal apology. So if you step on someone's foot, you just go like this and kind of apologize to them that way. So it's sort of like asking for forgiveness, really. And so that's kind of the video that's going on here. And I'm using this idea that I learned through the dance to inform the research and to consider the role of objects in art making. So this project has evolved quite a bit. So second kind of distinct vignette, apart from the dance, but carries through sort of. The flower most worn in the dance performance is the jasmine flower, which I still grow and cultivate, or I grow in my house for some reason. I can't figure out why I do this yet. I have 3 plants that I've kept alive for around 3 years, and they're really hard to manage, but I make time for it. And I don't know why. So I'm still trying to figure out what part of my art making practice is involved with the cultivation of these plants. So I've been doing this thing for a number of years, for the last 3 years, and then before that too, because I found stores of flowers from years ago that I forgot about. So here's the process. I grow the flower. It takes a lot of effort. They don't grow in Ohio. They're not native to this climate. They're tropical flowers, and they look like the image there. That's my actual plant. And so I grow these flowers. I tend to the soil. I give it the necessary fertilizer, buy it special, lights, just to get it to grow. And what happens is that they go kind of dormant in the winter, but in the summer they really start to bloom. This crop is actually from last week. So this crop is this. I've been saving it in my fridge for a week. I don't know why. So there's a couple of eventualities that come out of this practice. One is that I have the plant, and every day I wake up, and if it's summer, I go outside and I pick the flowers off of the plant, and I put them in my hand, bring them back inside, and either one, if there's a critical mass of flowers, I string them together to create something like this. If there's not, I put them on my kitchen counter to dry for a few days. And again, I didn't realize this was even part of my art making practice, or that it was art making. It's just something I've been doing. And it wasn't until very recently I realized that the material of this jasmine flower really had this effect over me. So I started to explore that further because I was really interested in materials and art making. So, and the smell of jasmine, and if you come up and smell it, it has a distinct perfume, and I think it reminds me of my childhood, and that smell sort of transports me back to the open-air markets in Chennai, where I used to buy spices and vegetables with my grandmother. So something about this object makes me remember a lot of more memories, and I think that's part of the reason I might collect it. I'm not sure, but it definitely has a sort of agential force over my daily life. I change my routine to accommodate this practice. The second thing I do for this practice is, so I could just put my jasmine flowers on a normal string, but I don't like that for some reason. So I take turmeric, which also reminds me of home, and I make a little paste out of it. And this paste is often used by Indian women as a beauty treatment. It's good for pimples and complexion in general. And so I take this paste, and I think the smell really brings me back to India too. So I coat the string on which this set of flowers is hung in turmeric paste and dye it golden yellow for some reason. And it's just part of the practice that evolved by this collection that started to happen. And I still have no idea why I'm doing this, but I'm very interested in the process. And so I'm just exploring it. And I can't even point to whether this is art making, but it's something that I'm compulsively doing. So like in Tim's talk about the kind of blurring of everyday life and art, I'm thinking about those issues too in this process that I just do anyway, and thinking whether I can represent this in some sort of art making thing. So after I do this process of the turmeric stain on the string, I string them together like this. So this is me actually a week ago stringing together this set of flowers that you see, this right here. I'm making a lot of decisions based on myself and what the flowers kind of intended. I'm attuned to these flowers now. They have some sort of vibrantness to them. I don't want to say they speak to me, but that's sort of what's happening. The purple ones in the background are a little bit drier, and they have dried on the vine. And I picked them anyway because they're very beautiful, but I decided not to include them in this string. And you'll notice that a couple of the bottom ones are starting to purple because that's what happens to the flowers as they dry out. But I've only included one very dry flower just because it fell off when I tried to include it, and so I decided that it didn't want to be included. And so I acknowledged the kind of agency of the flower to just not want to be in my little project, so I didn't include it. So what this has turned into is a couple of different kind of things. First, I have this sort of string-like representation. So what I do is I hang this up in my kitchen, so as I walk by, it just permeates the room with a really nice aroma. And as it dries, it starts to sort of brown and become these little forms, which I then have started to photograph. So to me, these entities end up being some sort of marker of time, a calendar, a way to mark the passage of the summer. I can tell like what was happening in my life at the time. The left string was in July when the sun was really warm and the plant was doing really well, so I got a number of flowers strung. The other plant, I decided to abandon the first string because I ran out of room. The second string then has in the middle a little bulbous area where I had some double jasmine bloom, and decided to incorporate those into my string. The third and fourth strings are subsequent months where I just didn't get a good crop, basically. And so they're sort of calendars, markers of time. They're I don't know, they just beg to be in this formation. And some of the flowers end up not being together. They end up pressed in a book. They end up maybe dried on the counter. This one I felt needed to be photographed by itself because it just told me it wanted to. I tried to put it in other formations. I experiment with these a lot. I move them around. But this one really held its own space, so I left it alone. Whereas this grouping I thought looked really interesting kind of together as a grouping of larger jasmine flowers. So these kind of, this project has evolved over a number of years. I think it's been about 3 now. And I'm still figuring out what this has to do with my art making process altogether, because I'm normally someone who, I mean, my practice in my MFA program involved painting, so now I'm just confused. So I'm trying to figure out where this kind of obsessive collection of this object fits into my making process, and why I'm doing this sort of obsessive collecting, and what it is about this particular object and what this plant that really draws me to it over and over again, because it's sort of, I find drawers of just dried flowers, and I don't know what happened and where they came from, and so I'm trying to kind of explore that further in the research and art making process, which I feel runs in tandem. So I think it evolved from my obsession to grow and dry jasmine flowers, but I can't exactly pinpoint what when I started, or what got me thinking about this project. And perhaps it was an interaction between myself and the jasmine plant, like you really caring for this object, really trying to grow this thing that doesn't want to grow in Ohio. Or it could perhaps bring me back to my childhood, my dance practice. It brought me to the question, perhaps we aren't considering enough when we talk about art making practice. Maybe I was never in control of this jasmine plant situation, and maybe the flowers and the plant itself dictated some of the decisions I made in referring to it and kind of growing with this project. And for me, it begs questions about if there's such a solid boundary between maker and made, and object and material, and person and body, subject, object. All those questions come up for me in this sort of inquiry. And as a person coming from an Eastern perspective, these delineations seem a little bit arbitrary, because when observed, these concepts permeate, overlap, infuse with each other. And I'm interested in troubling these boundaries to envision a way to discuss these areas of inquiry and how they might inform the way art-making practice is conceived and articulated. So I'm trying to make sense of this for myself, and trying to figure out if there's other artists who kind of let the material do like I've been doing in this project, which I didn't know was art when I started it. And I found Dieter Roth's Tischmats. And his Tischmats are basically this project that evolved with his son Bjorn. They both decided that they were going to display these mats. These are just mats that were supposed to cover his workspace and protect it from dirt while he ate lunch and had life happen at this table. And it was really interesting because they realized that this Tischmat represented a kind of art making in and of itself. So this is from an exhibition at Hauser and Wirth, where these mats were, it's like, I think the translation is literally table mat. These were presented as the piece itself. So for Roth, he was able to, it was started off as nothing more than just a work surface, to collect dust, but then it kind of evolved into the work of art itself through the process of Roth's external making. So I thought that was really interesting. Could these table mats have exerted some sort of agency over Roth? And it was a familiarity with this object what made him realize that it was indeed something that could be presented in such a way. And I'm thinking too of Sarah Ahmed, who writes, "I too am working on a table." This is a quote, sorry. Quote, "I too am working on a table, though for me the kitchen table is as much as a writing table, as much as the writing table provides a setting for action, for cooking, eating, as well as writing. I have a study space, and I work on a table in that space. I type now using a keyboard placed on a computer table which resides in the study as a space that has been set aside for this kind of work. As I face the table, and it is what I'm working on, I am touching the object as the keyboard, and am aware of it as a sensuous given that is available for me. In repeating the work of typing, my body comes to feel a certain way. My neck gets sore. I stretch to ease the discomfort. I pull my shoulders back every now and then as the posture I assume, a bad posture, I am sure, is a huddle. I huddle over the table as I repeat the action of banging of the keys with my fingertips. The action shapes me. It leaves its impression through my bodily sensations, prickly feelings on the skin surface, and the more intense experience of discomfort. I write, and in performing this work, I might yet become my object and become a writer. With the writer's body and the writer's tendencies, the sore neck and shoulders are sure signs of having done this work, this kind of work," end quote. So here Ahmed is thinking about and recognizes that the table exerts some sort of agency over her process of writing. And I wonder if the same kind of agency is exerted by Roth's Tischmats here. They too are a sort of table that made his neck sore while he was making his art, making his work during his process. So this notion of the agency of things and the interaction with the body are central to new materialist post-human scholarship. And many new materialist scholars contend that the objects with which the body interact have an agential role. This is my animation of an interaction, or an entanglement. So this is where the notion of entanglement comes into play. And this, again, is an entanglement. Karen Barad is a scholar with whose work I'm currently wrestling. She sees entanglements as a way to recognize that things, people, and entities are created through their entangled states. And as such, they're linked inextricably. Barad states, quote, "To be entangled is not simply to be intertwined with another, as in joining of separate entities, but to lack an independent, self-contained existence. Existence is not an individual affair. Individuals do not pre-exist their interactions. Rather, individuals emerge through and as part of their entangled intra-relating." Here she makes an interesting distinction between interaction and intra-action. And so going forward, when I say intra-action, I'm saying intra, not inter. What she means by intra-action is basically that the prefix inter has to do with between, but intra has to do with through. So she's saying that entanglements are describing actions through entities. So that's, if I say intra-actions, that's what I'm talking about. An entanglement approach does not consider discrete distinctions between mind, body, material, and the space necessary. So a little bit of what I started to get into with the dance performance. Instead, art making can be seen as a cloud in which their media, the artist, the media material, the concept, the space, all have agency in the production of artwork. So I propose a view of art making that interrogates the agential roles of the elements of art making practice. This view, approaching art making as entanglement, allows for questions about the roles of the artist, the material, and other significant items in the art making entanglement. Excuse me. So here, I also consider embodiment in my theories merely because I think it requires some attendance to, that I need to attend to the embodied, artist as an embodied entity in general. So it's interesting to consider Merleau-Ponty's view that it's necessary to consider corporeality as a way to bring meaning to matter and material agency. For Merleau-Ponty, through new materialist scholarship, meaning and discourses are always already interwoven and entangled. So another artist whose work I've tried to explore is Jill Magid, and her practice largely involves the interrogation and exploration of systems. And this is a kind of screenshot stolen from her website of a project entitled Evidence Locker. And basically, this project involved Jill Magid's continued interaction with the Liverpool police and their closed caption TV system, or closed circuit TV system, sorry, where she, in this red coat, she can be seen in both of these video stills. She's wearing a red coat and she is blindfolded and asks the Liverpool City Watch police to guide her through the streets while she's blindfolded. And so she's working with a number of associations here in this work, particularly through the CCTV and the Liverpool City Watch. And she gathers all of her results in this website, and you basically become a participant in her work through visiting her website and signing all of the necessary. You click a button and you kind of get all these emails as evidence of this interaction between Magid and the Liverpool police. So you get all of their police incidents reports. It's very weird. So she also explains that where visitors to the website also receive access to where her data is locked, and the emails will lead you to the data locker. I think this is interesting in terms of what Karen Barad says, that the universe is agential interactivity in its becoming. This is a quote. The primary ontological units are not things but phenomena, dynamic, topological reconfigurations, entanglements, relationalities, and rearticulations. And the primary semantic units are not words, but material discursive practices through which the boundaries are constituted. Through an examination of Magid's work in my proposal, I was able to track sort of how she uses and this idea of material discursive or material discursivity through her work. For example, she is working with this network of cameras through her art making that don't belong to her. She's working with this closed-circuit television. She's trusting the entity known as City Watch, which are just a police unit, with her safety while blindfolded on the streets of Liverpool. She's basically, she is the work and the process by which this whole project is realized does not seem to privilege the material or the discursive, but these processes seem to shape each other as envisioned by the concept of material discursivity. So she's working with words, she's working with matter, she's working with space in order to enact this performance. So here's a screenshot of Jill Magid's website where you can kind of go register and get the evidence of her her interaction here with the Liverpool police and other projects she's done. So meaning-making, from Barad's perspective, suggests that meaning is not produced solely by linguistic interpretation. In Magid's work, meanings are constantly being produced when her sight is discovered by an entity, me, for example. This could entail both human and non-human agents. She could be roved by a bot, and the bot could discover her work. It could be discovered by a person. So she's interacting with both types of entities. And so basically, if a kind of internet bot is combing her site, I wonder what conclusions it would draw from this as well. I'm going to wrap up because I'm out of time. In Magid's work, she's able to both stabilize and destabilize the way art making can be employed as a kind of apparatus through which to create and renegotiate phenomena and boundaries as material discursive forces, which are all kind of Baradian terms I'm using. So this opens up further implications for how the act of art making itself can be established as an apparatus within interactive entanglement. So acknowledging the agency of material in interaction and the pivotal role of both human and non-human entities in entanglement is vital to, I think it's vital to examining art making. Artists work much like Jill Magid through a variety of different media and processes, and to develop this concept further, it's necessary to examine my own interaction and entanglement with my art making. So I want to go back to the flower project a little bit more and kind of push it further and see what I can get. Thank you. There, I'll put this on.
You want to start?
Yeah, I can start. Okay. Thank you, Ramya. It was really, I don't know, it was lovely. I like seeing the work a lot. So I think the question,
excuse me.
I think your presentation, for me, is really interesting because I think I'm going to have more questions later.
Okay.
But I think one of the things that, and you addressed it, but I am curious to hear you talk more about it, is the idea of that sort of dissolution between boundaries, between even not just mind and not like a mind-body split, but mind-body environment, and that things sort of making sense and not being able to resisting linguistic. That's a feeling you articulated very well, just through this whole process, a feeling that I have a lot when I'm making. But at the same time, it's trying to figure out how to describe that in a class is really hard for me to sort of to talk about that particular feeling. And since I know that you have experience teaching too, I'm curious how you connect that, or if you do, or like if you haven't found a way yet, or whatever. I'm just kind of curious about it.
Really good question, and that's a major sticking point I have. It's a sort of intangible thing that's hard for me to articulate in any kind of way that makes sense. But I think the project of this, one of the projects of this dissertation would be to figure out a way to do that in a way that's kind of, I don't want to say easy to understand, but a way that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting for me too, because I have a background in linguistics, and now I'm saying, let's take a back step from language.
Right.
So I'm sort of like going against my own nature a little bit. So it's hard for me to negotiate that kind of path, but I'm really trying to attend to what you're saying.
Yeah, well, and it was just interesting just because, and I know it's going to come up again later, but like even like if you start with somebody like Deleuze or something like that, like the language seems like it has all these possibilities until like it doesn't almost anymore, and then like trying to figure out like, okay, if that's not, where's the next thing, and then how long will that work before that falls apart, like where, how you're kind of negotiating those spaces. So I don't know, I think it's a really interesting project, and it's something interesting to wrestle with, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I liked it too. It made me think about, I have a friend who's an art teacher in California, Todd Elkin, people may know him, but he posts a lot of things all the time, and he often says like this phrase, things speak to me. And so, like listening to you talk about it, I keep thinking like these things they're speaking to you, but there's something that you're doing about deliberateness, I think. There's a deliberateness to this entanglement that you're creating, which I think is I don't know that there's a question there, I just think it's kind of fascinating. Is it the shift of attention, the deliberateness of that? Is that the art, I guess, in some ways, is what I'm wondering.
Sure, that's a really good question. I think part of this, recognizing that this kind of a compulsive behavior was an art, was that I was recognizing that this object was doing something. So then I just went with it to see what would happen, and why I have droves of these things just sitting in drawers, and it's like, okay, let's do something with it, because why not? Okay. And then so it's just a matter of acknowledging the fact that this is happening, yes. And then going from there.
Yeah, I like how it fits. I like how you nestled it kind of, I guess, in the beginning with the story of the dance too. That I think there's something that is really nice, like you said, like the mind-body environment connection. Like apologizing to the floor beforehand is what a lovely thing to do.
Yeah.
It's so so in some ways it's about this like real sense of attunement to everything that I think that you're kind of cultivating, which I don't know. Does it make you feel? Is it relaxing? Is it?
The dance is not relaxing, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. It's a lot of banging your feet against the ground, so yeah. It's stressful even.
Interesting.
All right, I'm gonna.
Yay, Ramya.